You know, I mean, it was just common knowledge. This is how Jefferson put it. The privilege of giving or withholding our money is an important barrier against the undue exertion by the government of prerogative, which, left altogether without control, may be exercised to our great oppression. And all history shows how efficacious, how effective it's meaning the privilege of giving and retaining your money, how efficacious its intercession for redress of grievances and establishment of rights, and how improvident, how dangerous would be the surrender of so powerful a mediator by the people. The surrender by the people of so powerful. Never give up your right, the privilege of giving and retaining your money to the government as a way of controlling the government and dealing with oppression.
But of course, now that right is completely given up. I mean, they can garnish your bank account, they can steal anything you've got. I mean, the only way, I have a friend who doesn't pay income taxes, but to do that, he works as a consultant. Every few months he changes his job. When he gets his paycheck, he goes to a loan company and gets them to loan his money so it belongs to them. He uses a rented car. Otherwise, they just garnish it.
Okay, we're going to deal with that. We'll have, is it going to be a question and answer period, but we'll deal with it. It's the practicality of this. Okay, one big clue as to what the founders had in mind in 1791 when they added the First Amendment comes right out of the Declaration of Independence itself. The Declaration of Independence in this version, this little pocket version, is 5 pages. 3 of those pages are devoted to a listing of the grievances that the founders had against the government of their day. At the end of that list of grievances, you have what the scholars have called the capstone grievance, the grievance that capped all the others, the grievance that more than any one of the others led to the separation, led to to the Declaration of Independence. The straw that broke the camel's back, right? It's this. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms, and our repeated petitions have been answered only with repeated injury. A prince or a government, a prince whose character is thus marked by every act which would define a tyrant, is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Declaration of Independence, right following the list of grievances. The founders also knew what was showing up in the state constitutions. I mean, it was just common knowledge, this right to petition the government for redress of grievances, government's obligation to respond. The fact that government, is there to secure the rights of the people, no more, no less. Here's how New Hampshire put it. Article 10, these words were put in their constitution originally, and they're still there. Government being instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the whole community, and not for the private interest or emolument of any one man, family, or class of men. Therefore, whenever the ends of government are perverted and public liberty manifestly endangered, and all other means of redress are ineffectual, the people may, and of right, ought to reform the old by retaining your money until your grievances are redressed, reform the old, or establish a new government. The doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the rights of the good and happiness of mankind.
What's your thoughts on that second paragraph?
Just what it says. To stand by and allow the government to become arbitrary and exercise arbitrary control, arbitrary power, is absurd. To stand by and not resist a government that simply violates and decides that this is nothing but a piece of paper, and show no respect and not honor the Constitution. To stand by and just watch that happen and watch the country slide and transition from a constitutional republic to a democracy, I think, or worse, that is absurd. The doctrine of non-resistance to arbitrary power and oppression is absurd. For us to stand by and do nothing is absurd. know. But on the other hand, Jefferson was right. Most people prefer the calm seas of despotism to the boisterous sea of liberty, where there's always a wave crashing. I prefer the boisterous sea of liberty. I enjoy it. You know, it's all, and I'll lay my life down for this. But most people are not that way. How else do you explain the behavior in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic after their revolution? And if you explain that people put up with that for 80 years or more. They put up with it. I mean, most people prefer the calm seas of despotism. Yeah, everything's very predictable. You know, government makes all the decisions. You know, you wait in line for your bread or whatever it is. So here you have the First Amendment, the most important sentence in the entire Constitution. 5 freedoms, guaranteed, First Amendment, including the right to petition government for redress of grievances. You know, there are 10 law review articles on our website that were published in 1986 and 1987 on the right to petition government for redress of grievances. There were no law review articles published before that, and none since, that I know. What happened in 1986 to wake up the law school community and the attorneys to publish law review articles, law journals, on the right to petition? What happened? Ronald Reagan nominated somebody to be a federal judge. There was a citizen who didn't think the man was qualified, so he wrote a letter to the president, and he sent copies to the Senate and House Judiciary Committees, and he released it to the press. Well, the guy didn't get the job, and he sued this individual for libel. And the guy got an attorney, and one of his defenses was I was just petitioning for redress of grievances. That case went all the way to the Supreme Court, McDonald v. Smith, and the Supreme Court mentioned the right to petition government for redress of grievances. They didn't declare what it means. This is what they said. Just as the right of free speech is not absolute, you don't have the right to yell fire in a dark, crowded theater, the right to petition the government for redress of grievances is not absolute, you don't have the right to libel somebody. But that's all they said. But the law schools woke up and said, whoa, what's this? What's this right to petition? There was no case law. They didn't know what it meant. So they published these law review articles. And there are 2 that they're all on our website. You can click on them and read them in their entirety. But there are 2 that I would strongly encourage you, take the time to read. They are thorough, wonderful historical reviews of the right to petition. One by Akil Amar, a professor at Yale, and the other by Professor Gregory Mark, professor at Rutgers, who published his in the Fordham Law Review. But you learn a lot of wonderful things from those law review articles. For instance, you learn that for years after our Constitution was adopted, people claimed and exercised their right to petition the government for redress of grievances, routinely. And government always responded, always. Back then, before 1830, when people petitioned their congressmen for a redress of grievances, that petition went to a committee in Congress. And every Monday was petition day. They dealt with petitions for redress of grievances. And you always got an answer. But in 1830, the Southern congressmen prevailed, and they got a rule passed, a gag rule it's called by the scholars. What it said was any petitions for redress of grievances coming in from abolitionists to end the practice of slavery shall be permanently tabled. And that was the first time the government ever went on record saying we don't have to listen or respond. And it took John Quincy Adams 8 years to get that rule repealed. But the damage was done, and it's sort of a downhill, and this right has become the forgotten right until now. And we also learned that the rights of speech, press, and assembly, as we're doing here tonight, derived from that pre-existing right to petition the government for redress of grievances. People started petitioning members of Parliament. They obviously had to talk about these petitions. Prior to this recognition of the right to petition for redress of grievances, if members of Parliament suborned the power of the state,